All right, so I'm Michael Smith, Design Technology R&D Manager at Ford Motor Company. I'm going to slice my intro into parts. So design. I'm the kid that was getting in trouble in grade school for drawing cars. Went to an art school and graduated the degree that allows me to make money drawing cars. Technology, I'm a nerd. I use that term affectionately. Always have been, back from the days of Apple IIe's and BASIC. Raise your hand if you're that old. Love it. For the kids in the audience, it's a really old language. Anyway, R&D as self-explanatory, and manager just means I have a team of about 10 guys who are a mixed bag, and we'll get into some of their skill sets here in this following presentation in terms of what we get up to in design here. And now. And since I know that humans process visual cues 40 times faster than any other sensor, I don't have to read that for you. You guys already completed it. Thank you for reading my Henry Ford quote. This is kind of our mantra in my department. One other speaker talked about waking up every day, sort of living this. This is exactly how we think, and it helps to make the job easy. All right, so let's get some terminology down here. So when I say visual communications, what is that? Well, it's important enough that at art school they make a whole curriculum out of it, right? There's classes you take called VisCom. But for designers, it's about making a connection in your head. And so you start with an idea, maybe it pops into your head, and you give that idea purpose, right? It has to stem from some sort of purpose, right? And then you describe it, usually with words, and that gives it meaning. And then you have to share it, right? And in our case, that's describing it with form. And the talk, this title of this talk is, how is this evolving? Well, it's evolving in all these different ways. And my Adobe stock image didn't include what I thought was missing, so I photoshopped my own VR guy in there because he was missing in the progression. We're going to get into all these topics here in time. And I think the way it's evolving truly is in the manner in which we get to that purpose, meaning, and form. And I'll try and share some examples of that. All right, so making connections, figuratively and literally. Well, the idea of visualizing something, you have to make a connection with the person or the people that you're trying to communicate with in a compelling way in order to share that crazy idea and sell them on the concept. And also, it has to survive scrutiny, so it helps to have a good idea. So in San Diego, this is the first time I've been back since my first wedding anniversary 20 plus years ago. And I said, well, how am I going to connect with my audience? Well, let's make some connections between San Diego and Detroit, right? Well, I sort of skipped ahead. San Diego, right? Ocean, sun, surf, mountains, amazing weather. Detroit, pretty sure snow's in the forecast. We have fall leaves that change color. It's kind of cool. A lot of connections there, right? What we do share, undoubtedly, is car culture, right? So SoCal, speed shop, dry lake beds. We have Woodward Dream Cruise. If you ever want to stop by, it's kind of a crazy car party for a week. It's all about cars, right? Another connection that I don't know if you guys knew about this, but as an airplane lover, Consolidated Aircraft is a company that used to exist up the street here in San Diego, and they designed this B-24 Liberator, and we happened to make those in World War II down at the Willow Run plant next door to my house, and so I thought that was kind of cool, and so I got a crazy idea, and I'm going to share it with you. Let's design a futuristic EV hot rod, that is inspired by or is an homage to the Consolidated B-24 Liberator. And it's no idea is good without words. So a two-seater, electric, clean aesthetic, emphasis on a good aero, identify elements of hot rod, showcase the power plant, futuristic features, all that good stuff. You can read those words faster than me. Why did it just blank out? I hit the wrong button. So part of this is how can we shorten the time to design, right? So from the idea to a visual concept, I'm going to take you through the tools and technologies that we're using to do that. And I think where I'm coming from in this light bulb graphic illustrates it as this idea of using less energy to get to the idea. And so we'll talk about that. All right, so what does a designer do when they get a crazy idea? First instinct, right, is take it into Photoshop. And so that's that top left image. Does it blend or does it Photoshop? That was the test there. And the bottom right image is kind of the first taste of technology here. That's a line drawing that a computer shaded for me. It's a tool called viscom.ai, which you can go try out online. It's the sort of the first hint of AI and interesting things going on there. So let's get into AI here for a little bit. Stuart Russell is the co-author of this textbook called Artificial Intelligence, A Modern Approach. And I'm going to paraphrase, but he talks about, to keep AI from behaving badly, you want an AI system that is explicitly uncertain about your objective and perpetually open to your saying, no, that's not what I wanted. And so the example I can give you is an easy one. It's King Midas, right? King Midas said, I want everything I touch to turn to gold. And that doesn't work when you start touching your food or your loved ones, et cetera, et cetera. And I think, AI is wickedly powerful because it just wants to do what you ask it to do. And so the danger is then obviously putting in the wrong things. Well, the stuff that we're starting to play with now is text to image generation. And that's pretty safe in terms of the AI getting out of hand. Because you put in the prompt, right? It's up to you to supply the words, and then it will try to match that. And that's not what I want. Is he's just hitting the delete key. It's very addictive. I can, from personal experience, to keep tweaking the settings and hitting go. And you'd ask yourself, why is this important to this discussion? Well, in the time it took me, I submitted this talk, and then there's already an announcement that Stable Diffusion has some guy who's put it into VR. So that was just like in the last week. So things are progressing quickly in that sense. And so here's some images. I'm not gonna go through 100 because I made 100 images of this thing trying to get out of my head with words into a visual, and it couldn't do it, right? I picked 4, I think, images of it trying. And it's kind of cute, it put an airplane propeller, because like I said, I wanted to be inspired by an airplane, and it tried, put a propeller up there. These are getting pretty close, and they're kind of cool. And I think that ambiguity is kind of interesting, right? And I think a designer will take even something like this. I could turn, all these into a cool car. I don't know what sort of kitchen sink it threw in under the hood there, but you can sort of see that it's trying, right? It's really trying, and it's fun. And what it does really well is when I said ultra modern glass house, and then my wife said, make sure it has lots of trees. It does these things like crazy. You can do this stuff. And I think that has to do a little bit with the model, quote unquote, the model that's been trained on. And that will evolve over time as well. And that's kind of an interesting tidbit there. All right, so I promised you all field notes, and here's the first one. So I kind of feel guilty in a way. A lot of the speakers have been talking about COVID being like this sort of crash and burn sort of scenario. For us, it was amazing, and that sounds really bad to say it that way. If you wind time back to BC, before COVID, we were already set up for and inoculated in a way against what came about, because we'd already been using software like VRED for virtual reviews all throughout the building, and that was so enculturated that March 13th, 2020, when my boss and my VP showed up with a Post-it note saying, "How soon can you get these people VR at their houses?" It wasn't a big deal, right? We just sort of did it, and so this idea of being ready for without knowing we were going to be ready for it is kind of it makes me feel weird, right? Because everybody else is like, it was kind of a bad deal, and so the fact that we've now gone into this hybrid work mode has allowed us to do different things. And I think I agree with the last comments about, there's elements of things we're never going to go back to. And for sure with Ford, the hybrid work model is where we're at right now. And what it allowed for, and why I'm showing this get out there, I'm coining this new thing, RR, real reality. I've heard it called real time, which is kind of cool too as well. But if you've got to have two letters, so RR. Anyway, it sound like a pirate. And so, I was able to go on a trip to Chattanooga, Tennessee, where I shot the picture of that blue wheeled sweet hot rod. And inspiration for this talk happened there in Chattanooga. And that wouldn't have been possible if I didn't have this sweet laptop that my job provided me, a couple stands for the lighthouses, and my VR kit. Totally portable and mobile. And then I would say now post-COVID, there's this sort of get out there energy, right, to want to get back out into the real world. And I think the example I can give you is some EV teams were doing like real customer immersive research, saying, okay, well, how are we going to do a trip to the desert and camp, and planned it out and did it, right? And that's sort of I think maybe a latent sort of expression of wanting to get back to the real world. So jumping in and out of the metaverse, I think to be in the metaverse, you have to be able to get out of the metaverse and enjoy the real world as well. All right, so we're going to talk a little bit about Gravity Sketch. So normally in this process flow, it would have gone Photoshop. That was a horrible Photoshop sketch, and then some line drawings, and then a whole bunch of other sketches, and then eventually get to a 3D model. The way I do things now, and the way we're doing things increasingly at Ford, is you just go right into 3D. Gravity Sketch is an amazing tool. It's fun. It allows you to have designers and other people in the same space modeling at full scale, or at any scale, quite honestly, all collaboratively, and it's like gaining a superpower. And part of the superpowers that was sort of mentioned by one of the panelists, saying, what are the things you can't do in real life? Well, I mean, the stuff I can do in Gravity Sketch, I can stick my face through a surface and gun sight a line that I wouldn't be able to do in a clay model, for example. So anyway, here's a little video, because I didn't have time to have it set up so y'all would be able to jump into this VR session with me. But here I'm scaling myself to 100%. And this is just a short preview, and we'll get into a little bit more of why this is cool. And so here, the immediate advantage is to make yourself, I made sure this car fit me. I'm kind of selfish, right? So you can do real-time ergo studies. You can move and delete the flashlight. You can look around, check sight lines, grab the steering wheel. Good job. Make some vroom vroom noises, or electric whirring noises. Check the mirrors. We'll talk about that rear visibility in a second here. Anyway, this idea of I wanted to give you a sort of sense of, I thought it'd be lame if I just put up screenshots. So I tried to show, this sort of the ability to grab the world and to sort of move it around. And I think I do a turntable here. Again, this idea, we don't sell 2D pictures of cars, we sell 3D cars, right? So going into 3D makes the most sense. And to do it as fast as possible is better for everybody involved. All right, so talked about that. There's some screenshots for if you didn't like the motion aspects of the video. And then we'll get into a little bit of, hopefully you're noticing that I've done a good job to future the glass nose of the Liberator, and sort of take advantage of some of the inspiration, which you'll see later, that happened in Chattanooga. And right away you can start to live as the customer, right? Putting the VR headset on makes you the customer. And if you're designing, then you're designing as the customer. So now I'm noticing that I did a good job to increase forward downward visibility by making that nose all out of glass. And I'm assuming that's what they were doing as well for the Liberator bomber. We'll come back to this full width display in a minute. Even with screenshots, you can start to prototype. Hit the turn signal, turns on the camera, takes part of that full width display, and now you don't have an external rearview mirror. Saves a lot of points on aero. I couldn't do rudder pedals because there's some really sticky federal regulations about pedal size and things like that. So I just made them stop and go pedals, so it'd be easy to tell which one to hit. And there's a lot of discussion about yokes, steering wheels from other companies. This one is, it's got it locked in because it's inspired by an actual bomber yoke. And so, there's not a lot of glass back there, and that was to keep the aesthetic of the aircraft fuselage. And so I did the same thing with a digital rear view camera, just solve it with technology. Why not? Assisted parametric geometry. So that's sort of why did I put assisted on there? Well, it's because we've done a lot of testing with parametric tools and sort of neat generative models, but they're not as aesthetically pleasing right off the gate. So you kind of have to help it. Or go back in and reassess and sort of make it look nice. I think we're probably working on that. All right, so first buzzword. It's not what you think, because I know everybody thinks it's return on investment, but it's not. It's rate of implementation. And so one of the things that I've learned, especially with Gravity Sketch and its utilization, is that you really want that rate of implementation to go up, kind of like that graph, right? And it may be so that your return on investment would trail that, right? If everybody used it, then you're getting your returns later. But the thought was, and I've heard this, it's really kind of cool that the connections here, and having been at this event, is hearing other people sort of say the same stories as we've lived, and that is, if you just give people headsets and a tool, they're just gonna say that's neat, and then they don't want to use it, right? Or you could give it to anybody who asks for it. You really have to intend and follow along. And so we had a big pivot at one point where we said, look, we're going to stop just sort of giving it to individual designers and hope that they get excited about it. But we equipped one team, and it was with a very technology intending design chief who said to his whole team, you're going to get VR, you're going to use it. And they stopped using WebEx. They just started having design meetings, reviews, 2D reviews in VR, and completely took over their process. And that's why in the sort of liner notes of this talk, I said, these guys were already in the metaverse, right? They've already made it through that permeable membrane of virtual reality, and now they're just living there doing work. And I think it's really kind of wild, right? And so the supporting of the team tenaciously was important, right? So we didn't just give the team the tool and just say have fun. It was no, do inline training with them. And one of the brilliant things about Gravity Sketch is you do the training right on the job, right? There was no, hey, let's have some downtime and have you learn the tool. It was just get up and go. And also, I have a great team that makes tools for training, so that it effectively enables designers and everybody to do their jobs a little bit better with a little bit less hassle. And I almost hit the wrong button again. All right, so field note number 2 is get ready for the naysayers. There's been some talk about that already in some of the other presentations. I can't believe I actually heard somebody at work say this about Gravity Sketch. They said, if it's easy to use, it must not be good. And they said, I like to do things the way we always do it. And that's literally the battle cry of every naysayer in the world. And so if we put on our epistemology hat and say, let's attack that from an epistemological frame of reference and flip it around, that means if it's hard to use, it must be good, which is diabolical, right? Work smarter, not harder. And who remembers the Palm Pilot? Not the pilot of this Palm of this pilot, but the Palm Pilot. Does that fit if it is hard to use, it must be good? If that was true, we'd still be using the Palm Pilots, right? It was a great PDA, the first ever. But man, there it was for you kids who've never seen this thing before. It was actually my first hardware R&D project. I was a designer in the studio, and they said, we're going to give you everybody's going to get these PDAs. You're going to love them. And then you had to relearn the alphabet. It was really, you should look it up. Maybe have that in a museum at some point. and it really sort of speaks to, and I'm going to get a little bit nerdy here again with this stuff, the concept of cognitive artifacts, and it's coined by Don Norman, and the nuance of complementary versus competitive was the battle was joined by David Krakauer, who's a complexity scientist and evolutionary biologist at the Santa Fe Institute. If you aren't familiar with this concept, it's real easy. Abacus, never used one personally. Calculator. Teach somebody how to use an abacus. Teach somebody to use a calculator. Given enough time, you take the calculator away, they'll have learned nothing about how to do math. The person who has the abacus knowledge has been able to make a mental model in their mind of how math works. Complementary, competitive. This is the example that I give, and I know VR is going to win because designing in VR is complementary. If the power goes out, all the muscle memory that you use in VR translates right back to real life. Not so much the case staring at a 2D screen doing CAD, just saying. And maybe that's my subtle dig at the earlier person who said it has to be. It must not be good. And I think, the Palm Pilot is another example of that, right? It had elements to it that were not helpful. Okay, so in the stage of the design process, right, we've got the design, let's render it up. So this is VRED. This is another tool where because we have my guys who will make scripts and all kinds of cool stuff that make it really easy for a designer to have their idea just imported and rendered in this really high quality visualization tool. It's also collaborative. We have VR modes, we have ray tracing modes, and all kinds of cool stuff. And again, VRED was almost like the gateway drug, if you want to call it that, for VR at Ford within design, and really paved the way for the success of Gravity Sketch, to be honest. And so here's some cool shots. This is actually our, if you're ever to make it down to Melbourne, this is the courtyard in the Melbourne studio. I'd like to get there someday. We'll see. For now, I just have to enjoy it virtually. It's fun to do stuff like this, right? Custom nose art, right? There's another homage to the Bomber days. That was the person to come tell me I'm taking too long. All right, so let's go to the cloud. Pre-COVID at Ford, cloud was like a 4-letter word. Not so much anymore. And I think it's easy to understand that cloud is going to certainly enable a lot of XR tech continuing forward. And I'll just sort of parrot the sentiments of lots of other panelists here. It's all about extreme ownership. So for us, the entire R&D process is not just get a new puppy, play with the puppy, and hopefully everybody else loves the puppy. Is you have to become an expert on every aspect of the product. And I actually have in here, I didn't change my notes. It's become best friends with like-minded people in all relevant departments, IT, legal, finance. And I basically have a really attack dog kind of guy on my team who he's become so much of the expert on this stuff that now other departments are calling him to say, how do I get stuff onto the cloud? Which is really kind of fun. All right, so field note number 3. So I want to talk a little bit about, I call it the treadmill effect, and there'll be a challenge for y'all later. This idea of flow state, I don't know if it's exclusive to creative types or what, or if we just dream it up, but in VR, and working in Gravity Sketch, I've not just experienced this myself. I have other people telling me, hey man, can there be a clock in there? Because I lose track of time. And I tell them, just rotate your wrist. There's a clock on the, inside the interface of the software. Losing themselves in VR. And it's really kind of a testament, I think, to how cool and fun it is. And there's a bit of cautionary tale here, and that's where this treadmill effect comes in. I've also had users tell me, I spent 6 or 8 hours in VR, and then I jumped out and I pulled the headset off, and then the world was different. And I was like, please don't tell me you walked out into the street, into traffic. But that their sense of the world was different. And I think there's a lot of maybe doctoral thesis studies ready to be taken on this route. But you can see my presentation's got a lot of hexagons. It was inspired because I was actually on a treadmill staring. I took a picture of the wall in Chattanooga at the Hampton Inn, staring at this hexagon, and then the answer for that nose of the hot rod came to me, right? Just staring at it, and that's part of this get out there, let the world inspire you. But staring at that hexagon-based imagery, not just because they're the bestagons, I did 2 miles staring at this part of the wall, and I want you all to try this if you're up for it some other time. I don't know if I haven't scientifically studied this. Spend some time on a treadmill staring at a wall, and then when you're done, as you walk, you'll feel like you're walking 60 miles an hour. It's awesome. And it's something to do with the sensory sort of overload of being on a treadmill in a fixed position, but your legs moving, right? We'll get to another aspect of that in a second. So that's my cautionary tale from the metaverse. All right, so now we're into Unreal. Unreal Engine is going to continue the sort of journey of us into immersive experiences, and certainly expanding sort of beyond the traditional dome. I always call that the HDR Domes in VRED. And so here's just an example of my hot rod on a beach. I thought that was kind of appropriate for where we are in SoCal. And there you can see I've got the coast-to-coast display lit up because displays are cool, and you can make them show whatever you want. And here it is in some sort of art gallery with the taillights lit up. I don't know how I'm doing on time. Am I doing good on time? I forgot to set my timer. Let's talk a little bit about the story. So I think we'll all agree that VR is a very persuasive medium, but not everyone loves VR. And in fact, we get the typical percentages. I think we've been pretty much finding the same percentages of people who just get sick or whatever. There's some small population of that. But anyway, one of the cool things that's going on with Gravity Sketch, and we can share they call it Screen Collab. And what is Screen Collab? I've been calling it the portal because I like video games. And essentially the way to think about it is, it sounds counterproductive or counter to logic to say a VR application has just made a way to enter into VR via a 2D screen. But it might just be the magic sauce that we need to get more people into VR, so that, the sort of, if price of admission normally is a VR headset, we're already sort of excluding. And so to pivot this method of making it so you can jump in from lots of different places, to me is going to be really interesting to watch. In fact, we'll be testing this. I'll be starting next week with this stuff. But and so the Screen Collab is one thing, because if the metaverse is a place that you go to, then I think what's important is all the different places and avenues and vectors in which you can get to that metaverse. It'll be really important in the future. And just a quick note about pass-through AR. We've been finding that people like it not only for sort of seeing their vehicle in the context of the real world, but for reading faces and emotions and body language, which again sounds like they're not really taking full advantage of it. But I think that's an important sort of interpersonal sort of squishy element to it. I'm going to read a little bit here from my notes here. The most powerful method for coherently engaging all levels of the brain is through narrative. Stories are how the brain organizes information. The narratives leapfrog the individual attributes of technology by creating a holistic experience that engages the brain at all levels: instinctive, emotional, and identity. And I just aped that from the internet because it was really great. The brain processes imagined experience using the same physical and neural mechanism as real ones. So it creates genuine emotions and a sense of place. And so this last image here was a little bit extra stuff that I did because I wanted to tell you a story. Like many young boys in my family, we had RC cars, right? And we built and re-raced RC cars. And the coolest thing about it was upgrading them continuously. either motors or batteries or whatever, anything to reduce the weight. And so here I've done a little bit extra in this gravity sketch scene to show you that this hot rod can be upgraded with this really cool cooling pack, which is meant to look like a sweet supercharged V8, but it's really just filled with orange cooling liquid, and it's a way of cooling the electronics for this EV. And so here is one more video. The guy's he's holding the cap, being very good about making sure we don't lose the cap. And make sure the glass can fit back on there. It's just too much fun. I don't know how else to describe it. I think I have one more. Oh, I think it's the last slide. Anyway, this is what I feel like when I go in VR. I feel like I'm strapping a rocket to my back. I'll summarize by saying Gravity Sketch and other tools like AI, VRED, and Unreal will continue to accelerate how we explore purpose, meaning, and form in design. And I hope you had a good time with my talk, and thank you for your kind attention.